In common parlance, a devil's advocate is someone who, given a certain point of view, takes a position they do not necessarily agree with, for the sake of debate or to explore the thought further. In taking this position, the individual taking on and playing the devil's advocate role seeks to engage others in an argumentative discussion process. The purpose of such a process is typically to test the quality of the original argument and identify weaknesses, if possible, in its structure, and to use such information to either improve or abandon the original, opposing position. It can also refer to someone who takes a stance that is seen as unpopular or unconventional, but is actually another way of arguing a much more conventional stance. The background of this word comes from an official position within the Catholic Church, in which a canon lawyer called the advocatus-diaboli, also known as the promoter of faith, argued against the canonization of a candidate in order to uncover any character flaws or misrepresentation evidence favoring canonization. Origin and history. During the canonization process employed by the Roman Catholic Church, the promoter of the faith, popularly known as the devil's advocate, was a canon lawyer appointed by church authorities to argue against the canonization of a candidate. It was this person's job to take a skeptical view of the candidate's character, to look for holes in the evidence, to argue that any miracles attributed to the candidate were fraudulent, and so on. The devil's advocate opposed God's advocate, whose task was to make the argument in favor of canonization. During the investigation of a cause, this task is now performed by the promoter of justice, who is in charge of examining the accuracy of the inquiry on the saintliness of the candidate. The promoter of the faith remains a figure in the congregation of the causes of saints and is also known as the prelate theologian. The office was established in 1587 during the reign of Pope Sixtus V. The first formal mention of such an officer is found in the canonization of Saint Lawrence Justinian under Pope Leo X. Pope John Paul II reduced the power and changed the role of the office in 1983. This reform changed the canonization process considerably, helping John Paul II to usher in an unprecedented number of elevations. Nearly 500 individuals were canonized and over 1,300 were beatified during his tenure as pope, as compared to only 98 canonizations by all his 20th-century predecessors. In cases of controversy, the Vatican may still seek to informally solicit the testimony of critics of a candidate for canonization. Arup Chatterjee, the author of the book Mother Teresa, The Final Verdict, and Christopher Hitchens testified against the late nun as a so-called devil's advocate. In fiction, Morris West's 1959 novel The Devil's Advocate, which was made into a 1977 film of the same name, follows the arguments and intrigues in the case for and against canonization of a charismatic English deserter in the Italian campaign in WW2. It gives a good explanation of the Catholic theology behind sainthood, but, more than that, the logical and legal process is required in the role of the devil's advocate, who, in this instance, is also an English priest who has spent his adult life in the Vatican. The devil's advocate plays an important role in opposing canonization for Leibowitz in the classic science fiction novel A Canticle for Leibowitz, written in 1960 by Walter M. Miller. Leibowitz, an engineer killed while trying to save written works being destroyed by the scattered and embittered survivors of a nuclear apocalypse, represents the human desire for knowledge that is ultimately self-destructive. The 2000 novel Angels and Demons by Dan Brown featured a depiction of a fictional devil's advocate who contributed negative information about each candidate for Pope, though in reality the devil's advocate never had any role in the selection of a Pope. show, and the position as described had been changed completely 17 years before the publication. The British TV series You, Me and the Apocalypse, which premiered on September 30, 2015, features Rob Lowe in the role of Father Jude Sutton, a foul-mouthed priest who has been assigned to the recently reinstated office.